Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here, to be in the midst of distinguished guests, uh, Miss or Ms. Michelle Huggins Watts. Ms. Huggins Watts, are you Dr. Huggins Watts?
No, not yet.
Not yet. I know I just want to make sure that I'm right on the spot. So this afternoon, we have one of these public education programs, and the lead interviewer is no other than Dr. Richard Tang, former Panorama judge. And
Right.
today, it is a good, it's an honor to be part of this platform and to create a forum where we could have a discussion about not just steel band music, but uh, steel band culture and some of the little ingredients that goes behind a production in the carnival season. The essence of the show essentially would be to get into the culture that is steel band culture and to talk about some of the development of the music, the development of the steel pan as an industry. And Miss Michelle Huggins Watts, it's a real pleasure to have you here. We know that, when we see your face, we think face too. But there are other facets to there are other facets to what you do and to the special blend that you bring to the season. Thank you so much for being here. Dr.
Thank
Tang Yok, she's clearly in your hands and your care this time. I'm simply being Robin and you're Batman.
Well, Michelle, it's great to have you with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. And as Fareed said, we want to talk about some specific things, but also in general. And if we could start, I know you've been involved with the steel band movement for many, many years. I'm sure there are lots of stories you could tell us. But I wanted, if we could just start by you commenting on some of the positive changes that we've seen in the steel band movement when from the time that you started first playing pan to today. What are some of the positive changes that we've seen? And then we're going to talk about where do we go from here.
Okay. All right. So some of the positive changes, number one, being female, I guess, but not necessarily just holding a female perspective, is the growth of females who participate in the steel band fraternity. And when I say participate, not just as players, but in all sphere of pan. So we now have female tuners, arrangers, um, along with, of course, the panists and so on. So it's very healthy for the art form to see that it has gone in this direction. We have females in leadership, excuse me, within the context of the steel band management as well. And as you know, Ms. Beverly Ramsey Moore, she's the president of Pan Trinidad. So at the very helm of the governing body, there is also female leadership. So this goes to show that females are able to not just be seen as, okay, well, they can play some pan now, but they can also hold down the roles of leadership in a very responsible manner. It's a big takeaway for me because I remember the days when I first started at St. Francis and we used TNTech Power Stars pans. I remember times on afternoons when we would get to the panyard to rehearse, we would go innocently and take out tenor pans and we'd start to practice. And within a half an hour or so, when some of the other guys started coming in, those who were assigned to teach us and so on, would come and say, no, 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 y'all can't play those pans. And they'll take them from us and bring out some old looking half rusty pans because they thought was these girls going to beat up the pan and mash them up. And, so, and we just used to laugh because in our minds we used to say, they could do what they want. We know we could play better than so
Yeah.
yeah, so that's to tell you where it has evolved from. Um, some of the other positives in terms of the organizational structure of the panorama competition. Not too long ago, there were probably 100 and something bands varying for titleship and to move forward from the panorama prelims to semis and so on. And it was like whatever time it started, probably midday, and the competition wouldn't end till probably 4 in the morning or so, 100 and something, which to me was a tremendous task on adjudicators. I mean, come on, let's be real. It's human beings, and to sit and listen to all of these bands in one sitting, that was
Now,
mad.
correction.
Huh?
The preliminaries and notes started at 10 a.m. and it
10
went to yes,
over.
and it went
Well,
till 4 a.m. the next
tempo.
morning,
Ah,
without a break. The only break we had was
washroom.
when one band was moving off. We had to go to the washroom when one band moving off stage, and the
Okay.
next band is positioning. That was the only break. We had to eat in those breaks as well. So
Correct.
yeah, you're right, and I want us to talk about that as you raise this issue because
Yeah.
last carnival season, Mr. Ali and I interviewed a lot of band managers about this whole panorama competition. And
Right.
of course, a concern, what we glean from it, there's generally some dissatisfaction out there about um, the competition, different aspects of the competition. Of course, if they win, they're very happy, but if they
Right.
don't win,
Yes.
there's a lot to complain about. And one of the things that we consistently hear is, comments about the adjudicators. Who are the adjudicators? How are they chosen? What are the criteria? Um, we often ask if there's input from the different bands on the selection of adjudicators. I think we got some mixed answers on that, Fareed. I think some people said, yes, Pantry Legal does consult us. Other people said, absolutely, we have absolutely no say, or we couldn't recommend someone. But
Mm.
I remember in the discussions last year, on more than one occasion, this whole notion of a judge judging from 10 a.m. until 4 a.m. the next day is
Dr. Tang, your mic. You seem to have touched oh, we are back with us.
okay.
You
Sorry, how
accidentally
much did
touched
you
the
miss?
mute button, yeah.
Yes. A judge judging from 10 a.m. That's where you
From
reached.
10 a.m. to 4 a.m. the next morning, I mean, it's a bit unrealistic. No
Mm.
matter how much we try, and I think all judges do try their utmost to be fair and to, give the attention that every band deserves. But I mean, just human fatigue.
But of course, of course. I mean, you
Once we get,
basically have to hope that most of the bands will bust on stage and that will help with the process of elimination.
but okay, you made some good points about the positive developments in the steel band movement. Um, Uh, do you find that there are more bands now than, let's say, 20 years ago, or fewer bands active?
Well, I have not done a statistical survey, but my wild guess is that there are more bands. And why I say that, it's due to the structure that I was mentioning before. So you now have single pan category, you have small bands, medium and large. Not so much in the large, but when it comes to single, small, and perhaps even medium, I am pretty sure there's an increase there
Yeah.
because it's sort of more of a viable opportunity to probably try to get some pans together and become a single pan band, for example. And then same thing happens in the small band arena. So I remember some years ago, I'm not sure if that still is the figure. There were 75, I think, or was it as many as 81 single pan bands registered for the competition. And that's single pan alone. Whereas back in the day with one category, we're talking about probably 60 something bands, 70 something bands in all. So I'm pretty sure that there are now more steel bands as a result, yes.
Mhm. I want to ask you a question, which I like to ask of the Pan fraternity. I have asked it of different persons before. I would like to get your reaction to this. So,
Mhm.
just this past week, I was speaking with a colleague in New Jersey, and she said to me, you know, Richard, why don't you organize to bring a steel band to New Jersey to perform here? It'd be quite a sensation. So I
Mhm.
said, well, of course, I'm sure it will be very well received. You know, I used to live there, so I know the community,
Yes.
and there's nothing like um, this kind of the Trinidad culture that exists in New Jersey, in that part of central Jersey.
Yeah.
But um, I immediately said to her, well, you know, it'll come down to funding because it means, I mean, I'm sure we could find a band that wants to go and will be able to prepare and perform. But one of the logistical issues that bands always have to consider is transportation costs for the bands.
That's right.
And she said, well, couldn't you find a band in New York and borrow or rent pans from them? So this raises the issue of the standardization of the pan. Now, I know there's been some progress in this area. So I wanted, if you could talk specifically about this issue of the standardization of the pan and why is it in 2025, we're now in 2025, it is not completely standardized. Um, is there, do you see it as an important step for the pan fraternity to say, the argument we hear is, well, this pan tuner he wants to tune the pan in fifths, and this other one says, no, it must be in fourths, this is a better system. So we know that any kind of agreement of a standardized pan is going to involve some compromise. It's
Correct.
going to involve compromise. But what do you think about, would we not gain more and would the movement not develop faster if we made those compromises and everybody played on a standardized pan, no matter if it was double seconds, cello pan, bass, tenor bass? What are your
Right.
thoughts about all of this? I know it's a little bit of a tricky subject.
Well, standardizing the pans would definitely, I mean, years ago I was saying that's the way to go. I fully endorsed it because there are so many benefits. For example, what you just raised, a band is seeking to go on tour. Steel bands are not anymore confined to Trinidad and Tobago. You have steel bands all over the world now. So if you're making a trip to whatever part of France or New Jersey or wherever, okay, we need a 16-piece set and so on, and you just all you have to worry about is airfare for the members of the band. Um, and that's one positive thing about it. Now I also hear the other side of the argument, which is particular tuners would be able to capture a particular tone when they tune in a particular system. So whether it's the thirds or the fourths and fifths, which is more the standardized way for the frontline instruments, right? But I'll tell you what, some years ago, when I was arranging and so on for a particular band, um, I went to teach music to the guitar pan section. So when I left the person I taught to teach the others, they came back to say, but the guitar pan I am playing is different from the guitar pan you showed so and so. And then a third person on another guitar pan had a different style from the other two. So that band had three styles of guitar pans, which was ludicrous. It was I couldn't believe it, you know. So in terms of because we all know with pan and the rote learning is the way of learning music, particularly within the pan context. So when one can easily show, strumming the chords, this is it, and the chord, right? You have to stop to, figure out, okay, no, it is on this side or over there, and the other pan it's below in the middle or something like that. It kind of retards progress. Um, and then some of the players can only know the notes, and this is specifically at carnival time, only know the notes by sight for what they're seeing. So if the positioning of those notes are not the same, exact same in the other pan, they can't teach the other person, and the other person can't see what they're doing, so they can't learn. Otherwise, if they are more familiar with the notes, they might be able to say, well, okay, C and E. So no matter where C and E is on your pan, you can find them and play. So these are the sorts of issues that arise, and I would be a strong advocate for standardization, if only for that as an example.
Yes. Yeah.
But but
So
the tonal quality that one arranger may derive was, as a result of tuning within a particular, and then too, that's what they know, and it might be too much of a challenge. They may lose some of the quality and strength of the notes that they produce if they were, well, I don't want to say forced, but let's use it for want of a better term, forced to go a particular route. So, that those are the issues.
yeah. So I'm sure there are other practitioners who would advocate for this complete standardization across all the instruments.
Instruments, yeah.
What is holding it back, other than, okay, somebody is going to have to compromise and say, okay, we're not going to use this system of tuning. There is going to be, but it sort of reminds me of, if we could think back, um, you know, a few centuries, when in China there were all these different regions and kingdoms, and everybody spoke a different language.
Right.
Until you decide, okay, we're going to standardize the Chinese language, and we're now going to teach Mandarin. It doesn't mean that we let go of the regional dialects and so,
Mhm.
but in order for the country to progress, there
Right.
had to be this standard of communication. And
Mhm.
in a sense, this is the same issue, right? It's a standardized method of communicating the
Correct.
music to the players who are learning it by ear, learning it
Mhm.
by sight. And we both know that in music, on practically any instrument, not only pan, it could be on piano, violin, the motoric skills and the visual and the positioning of your arms, your fingers, we
Yes.
learn this pattern and we
Correct.
practice this pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And moving now to another instrument where it's completely differently organized, it is impossible unless
Mm-hmm.
you had a couple of weeks to relearn the piece.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what is holding back this progress?
I would think it's just change is not something that is readily accepted, even though it might be needed. So I think change, unwillingness to change is one reason. But on the other hand, I am not prepared and equipped with the necessary information in terms of tuning and so on, because that's not my area of expertise. So there may be other areas as far as that is concerned that tuners might be better able to speak to.
Mhm.
Right? I don't think from an arranger's point of view, that standardization will be an issue. The arranger just wants to know that the pans are sounding good and they have instruments that they can easily get music to flow and pass on,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
I think it's a tuner's question. They are the ones to really speak better.
Yeah.
They will speak better to that. Yeah.
Farid, did you want to add to this topic discussion? Do you remember we raised this with several of the arrangers or band managers last season?
One of the concerns that I have, and Miss Huggins, what you may be able to add some value here.
Uh-huh.
When we spoke with arrangers in the past, their concern is sometimes a band and its arranger has a certain tonal quality that they're looking for. Particularly the arranger, he has in his mind um, a blueprint of the music that he wants the band to execute. And having that blueprint, he would naturally be hearing in his ear um, what he wants, meaning he expects the band to play at a certain level. Um, if it is you have, and this is my question, if you have arrangers with a piece of music in their mind. And naturally, your music may be only as good as your players who could perform that music.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the instrument is important. You can have the best players, but if it is you don't get that tonal quality in your pans, in your instruments, um, the marriage of the arranger's music and the panist um, falls on deaf ear if the instrument in which you're executing that music isn't where it should be.
Right.
Um, Arrangers were saying to us in the past that they use particular tuners who give to them, who lend to them a particular tonal quality. So
Correct.
my concern is this: I can appreciate that position, um, but does Pan Trinbago and does the organization that is responsible for managing the industry, um, do they have a position where arrangers or where tuners are, if I may put it this way, I don't want to use the word license, right? That's a strong word.
Mm-hmm.
Accredited, where you
Right.
have a tuner that is accredited with the organization and they are recognized as in, okay, so we recognize this particular family who is steeped in tuning pans, and therefore um, they can share that expertise with other tuners, or there could be some standardization on the
Mm-hmm.
level of the tuning. And when I say standardization, at least if there are tuners that are working in team with each other, then there is a standard that can be set, as opposed to just a south band coming with a certain tonal quality and a north band coming with a different tonal quality. If the tuners are all in working hand in hand, then the playing field in terms of the tonal levels will be the same. I don't know if I'm communicating that point in a manner
You're
that
right. There are a number of things I think you're saying here. Um, First of all, the original question was really about standardization in terms of the positioning of the notes. So a C is in the center in every tenor pan and not on the center on one, on the right on another, and so on. So in terms of positioning, what you are speaking more about is the tonal quality, which of course every arranger wants to have a well sounding organization. Their instruments must be beautifully, because I mean, an arrangement could be really, really fantastic and mind blowing. But if the pans are not well tuned, it's not going to have the impact, right? It's not going to have the resonance and so on. On the other hand, something that we also need to put into the equation with that is the quality of the drum that is being sourced to create the pans. If the drums are of poor quality, it impacts, well, negatively impacts the quality of the tuning of the instruments. So that's another thing to put into the pot. And again, if a band may have the best tuner for tuners, let's say specialized areas, those who do frontline, those who do background, they manage to have two or three of these um, tuners, but the instruments they're working with, you know, a lot of steel bands are suffering. So they may not have the financial resources to have the best fans and so on. And the tuner will try his or her best, but you can do so much and no more. So yet that is another factor, right? So we're looking at standardization in terms of the positioning, that's a separate issue. And as you are saying, the tuning of the instruments, how well tuned they are, how resonant, how well are they able to really have the music well executed and interpreted because of how it sounds and so on. So definitely that's what every arranger will want, right? And you touched on a nice point too in terms of, okay, is there some sort of certification or so with a list of qualified stamp of approval type of tuners?
yeah.
Actually, that is something I believe is in the making, where there's a list, same similarly for arrangers and so on, a listing for tuners and the rangers and so on who can be sourced. I don't want to speak too much of it because I might say something that might not be 100% accurate, but know that sort of thing is in the making, and Panchin Bego has been looking into it, as well as I'm also on a national steering committee, and we are tasked with the responsibility of developing a governance framework for the steel pan art form. And that is one of the things we are looking for. Um, One of the things we are looking into. So it will take a while. It definitely isn't going to happen overnight, but we are hoping that there will be some very, very solid implementations in the next, let's say, over the next 2 to 5 years.
One of my concerns is if we have the more elderly tuners transitioning out of where we are, if these guys die in 5 years and they don't share their expertise with the younger ones,
Mm-hmm.
then we lose a certain edge that would have transitioned from one generation to the next. This should
Correct.
have been done 15 to 20 years ago, even before that. So
Mm-hmm.
at this point, our conversation wouldn't be about putting something in place because Panorama started in 1963.
Correct.
That's a long time.
A hell of a long time. But some of the tuners, the older tuners, have passed, and there are those who are not functioning in the way that they used to, but there are those who are understudying them. So that's a good thing. And I also believe that there is less of you know, less of a keeping it close to your chest approach, because the pan it's gone. And when I say gone, a good type of gone, it's not just confined to the boundaries of Trinidad and Tobago. It's all over. There are pan tuners all over. I was in France some years ago conducting workshops, and I was amazed at the pans that a French tuner made. Now the quality needed some refining, fine, but the pans were as smooth as butter. You're not seeing any indentations and show. And he showed me his process and everything. So good pans are being made abroad. There are local Trinidadians and Tobagonians who live, like for example, in Japan and so on, guiding the process. So it's taking some time, but I know that eventually it's going to be all resolved. At least I'm very positive about that.
That would be good. That would be a definitely a positive development. And
Yeah,
if we do one day have complete standardization, I think
mhm,
that we'll then see exponential development in the amount of time it takes to
that's
learn a
right.
piece. It's already fast among some players, already quite fast,
Yeah.
but it's I liken it to this. It's if it was standardized, it's like the invention of the computer. Everything's going to go 15 times faster
Fine.
than it goes now.
There you
You know,
go. Hmm.
because then we can then translate what we learned here to there, and it can go abroad. It can go
Yes,
anywhere.
the way you
So it's
are.
just going to be very easy. You know.
Mhm.
So well, I'm glad to hear that there's some developments on that front because I always wondered why is it taking so long? But then I'm impatient, you know. Um, I, I often think, because as you know, my background is piano, and I
Correct.
often think, if I practiced at home and then I went to the concert hall and the notes on the piano were in a different position, there's nothing I could do. Absolutely nothing. Doesn't even. I mean, not talking about memorization. It has nothing to do with memorization or
No.
reading notation. It's just
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where to put my hands because I'm
Exactly.
pressing what is G sharp on my keyboard and I'm getting
See?
B flat. So, I see this as a really significant challenge we have to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
I think
Um,
we'll get there though.
yeah. Yeah. I want to ask you a question about, well, I don't know how long it's been happening. As you know, I've only been back in Trinidad about a little bit more than 2 years now.
Right.
And I know that I've become aware that there's several highly skilled players who now play with multiple bands at Panorama Tang.
Oh, yes.
They play here on a Tuesday, then on Thursday they're playing here. They're coming back to you on Saturday for an hour because then they had to run down south to play with that band. And I know some of these bands have the means to pay these
Yes.
in-demand players. So it's supply and demand. There's this pool of players who can learn 10, 12 pieces, panorama pieces, and they
Mm-hmm.
spend their time, and the band managers want them, so they're going to spend some money. Now, I know there's some band managers out there who feel this is unfair. Either you're playing for this team or you're not playing for this team. Other people feel, well, there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, this is the time that a highly skilled pianist could actually earn some money from their art. And why should we stop them from, capitalizing on that during the panorama season? What is your view about this?
Hmm. Wow. My view is not a good one.
No, tell me. No, I wanna know.
Okay. So I totally endorse supporting talent. So if there are pianists who have that talent to learn several panorama arrangements for this season and do yeoman service, when, because I mean there are those who they play in 10, 15 bands and they might play maybe two songs properly. They may not capture the essence of the others, but that's another thing. So I'm fully in support of that. From the pianist perspective, it works. I knew um, a young lady. She and her sister played with a few bands well, and at the end of the season they were able to buy a nice little second-hand car. So, hey, what's wrong with that? Now, when you look from the perspective of the steel band managers and arrangers and captains and so on, it's a different viewpoint because I mean, let's think of it. The best scenario is every night everyone turns out. You may have a few absentees here and there, fine, no problem. But the best scenario is that. But you don't get that. I mean, it has reached a stage where bands have to schedule rehearsal sessions based on when they know the squad from south is coming or the east squad is coming, or right. So there have been bands, and I'm talking about single band category, small band category, medium band category, and I'm seeing where it's impacting some of the large bands as well, right? So some bands will start practicing 11 o'clock, sometimes midnight, because trying to start before that is futile. So they start, everyone comes out for 12, the south and the east and the north or wherever posse will come, and they'll probably rehearse for 2, 3 hours till 3 in the morning, and that's it. Other times, okay, you will start with maybe 3 or 6 persons, and it's very frustrating for an arranger because if you have 3 or 6 persons, especially when it's just three, you certainly in teaching all the voices because there are more than three voices in a steel orchestra. So it's very frustrating from the perspective of an arranger as well. Just recently in the small band category, I know of a young man who was arranging for one of the small bands and was totally, totally frustrated. Ah, his mom would call me and say, Michelle, only 6 people here. I'm getting scared. The competition is Tuesday and only 6 people are here. And I'm talking about Friday. Then Saturday, same thing. I said, don't worry, darling, don't worry. That's a new culture. You'll be surprised to see people will come out on the day before and they'll be in the yard learning in music and so on. So said, so done. She texts me, Mish, you were right. So many people were here last night. I was in shock, right? And I went last night to support them and listened. And they It was, you would never believe that just 2, 3 days before that there were 6, 7, 8 people practicing. Nice full band, they sounded well rehearsed, but because of the various good players, fortunately, they got good enough players who can help the music to settle and to be properly presented on the night. So if
Right.
you are not aware of that, that is what goes on behind the scenes, you'll say, "Oh my God, these bands are doing so well," blah 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 blah. But it's a
You
lot
would
of
panic.
stress.
You would,
Yes,
yeah. But
yes.
so certainly the arrangers, I mean, so it's interesting to hear about it from your perspective. So certainly the arrangers know this. They know it's a frustrating process, but
Yeah.
you mentioned
Yeah.
something a second ago. If you find the right skilled players,
Ah,
you could
there you
end up with a really good product, but
go.
so much
Nice.
depends on the personnel you
That's
end
right.
up with. It can't
Mm,
just be anybody who say they're playing with that band, that band. It has to
yeah.
be the right people, the people you
Right.
know them,
Right.
you
Right.
know how fast they learn, you know
Mm-hmm.
what they can do, you know how they will fit
They'll
into
deliver.
your ensemble
Yes.
and that
Yes.
they're going to deliver. Because some people might be skilled, but when they come into your band, they may not be able to fit into your culture
Or the,
or your
or the style
vibe
of music they're asked to play.
or the yes,
That's
yes.
another thing too.
So, but I mean, how can one blame a panelist who he has an opportunity to earn money, and
Exactly.
this season,
Damned if
right?
you do, damned if you don't.
The rest of the year there isn't this high demand, and
Mm-hmm.
if we want the industry to move towards some kind of professionalism, not I don't use the word professionalism in terms of the quality of the playing, but I mean being able to earn a living from it,
Hmm.
right? If we're going to move towards that, we can't hinder when things begin to develop where they
Yes.
can earn money because their skills are in demand.
I'll tell you what from what I see, what has kind of caused this problem is the growth. Remember that was the initial question with the number of steel bands now.
Yeah,
Um, we have more bands than players than
yeah,
yeah, too many players. Sorry, too many bands and not enough
yeah,
players. Bands are always short, so they're always going to. So while you can get, when you're lucky, a good crop of players coming from outside to help execute the music, you will inevitably end up with some players who ain't too hot. But you don't want to
yeah.
get disqualified because you have not made the minimum requirement. So there are
Right,
literally some people who make up numbers. They might
right,
learn a little something, nothing too much, they're skating here and there, but they're helping you to
right.
make up the numbers. So you have all of that in the fray as well.
I want to
That's
ask you.
another thing. I just wanted to add one more thing.
Go
Sorry,
ahead, go
Renee.
ahead. Yes,
But
no,
we
go ahead.
also have bands who come to the fore, they just mushroom. It's like flowers at a certain time. You know, like poinsettia would get red for Christmas. Right. So this is the Christmas carnival panorama is the Christmas season for the players. So the bands now will just they bloom during the year. You ain't seeing them, you ain't hearing them, but they come to the focus. That's the possible time when they can make some money. So they will come. So you have all sorts of. I mean, three of us together. We can after this show, we can say, "Hey, let's start a little single pan banner. We pool all in resources. We start up something. We register, and boom, we in Panorama next year. Don't
Hmm.
we now need more players? So that's what
Hmm.
keeps happening. More and more
Yeah,
bands keep to the fore, and not enough human resources to respond to that call. So you're
yeah,
left with needing other players to come, needing other
yeah.
players.
Let
Yeah,
me ask you a little bit about the culture in the band in this type of scenario where certain players are coming in at the last minute. Does it create any kind of resentment amongst regular members who are there for weeks practicing and learning their music, and then a bunch of people come in the last 2 days? Is there any kind of tension with that, or they are happy to have any and everybody come at the last minute? It's a serious question.
very happy, yes, until it depends on whether they get dropped for the players who just came in. or the players who just came and get more money at the end of the day than they got. The so-called contracted players and crack
Yeah.
shots and so on. So that's where the resentment comes in. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hmm. I suppose this is how I'm trying to think about, uh, developments in the world of choral music and instrumental music, like European orchestral music.
Right.
I think it's the same process of development, that there will always be some musicians who are in high demand who are going
So,
to demand and receive a higher fee because
correct.
they can deliver what you need.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Are you of the view that the current format that Hanshin Bigger as an organization has adopted, where the single pan starts in the month of December, though the latter part, and therefore we move into the small band, which is where we are now, the small band prelims. So in other words, when we stagger the competition in terms of single, small, intermediate, medium, into large, it makes more players available without impacting on the larger bands. In other words, the competitions don't um, overlap. They're free, separate, and distinct, and they move in sequence. So it allows, let's say, a phase two player to play with a medium band, or Desperados player to play with a small band, and it wouldn't affect or impact on Desperados' large band practice. So it seems that Pancho Bego's mindset is mindful of the fact that overlaps can impact on a band and their access to players in staggering the competition at different stages beginning in
Yes, that is
December.
the answer.
You,
Yes, that is
you
the
create
response there.
right, you create a clear the thing is, and this is my question, are you of the view that separating single, small, medium, and large is in any way watering down the competition? Are you impacting on before when it was everyone in the same in the old days before we had the separation? Do you think the quality would have been a higher quality and higher standard as opposed to now? Does the division water down the product, or you think it helps to it helps in some way?
Right. Okay. Before I respond to that, I just wanted to make a comment on what you said before with staggering the competition, and it now leaves people more free to participate in the larger bands and so on. But that is not necessarily so, because there are so many players, especially, you see, the day of the panist who is loyal and everything is their band and community's band and so on, that day is unfortunately saying bye bye to us. So we have a vibrant crop of younger players who can play with several bands, and they will play with several bands, and they will make their extra cash. As a result, it still impacts the large bands because, for example, when there is the small band finals or well, let me not say preliminary semis or finals, where there's single band, small band, medium band, there are players from these bands who are also playing there. So those nights practice sessions are deadish, and you know it's not the best. So there is still an impact, right? So I just needed to say that. Now the other thing you were asking was what? Just sorry, just remind me.
Do you think it's watering down the quality, the final product in the music?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I would say as a result of that, one thing, I mean, we have to look at it from a very holistic perspective, right? Because of that, a lot of arrangers have been able to come to the fore and shine, because lots of young people are being seen now in, I mean, I see students of mine who are now arranging in the various categories. And you have single pan arrangers, small band, medium band, and so on. And similarly for young tuners coming up, we have tuning programs like with MIC and so on. So they are getting opportunities to arrange. I mean, a large band wouldn't call someone who just graduated from an, hey, come and tune for me. So they are getting their opportunities, and they can, where they can hone their skills, build their craft, get noted, and as time goes by, they move up gradually. So I don't think it has watered it down at all. Not from that perspective. Um, if you mean from the penmanship's perspective, I will still say um, the only thing, as you mentioned before, is the general impact of personal session, um, which could impact on your final performance. But again, it depends on the strength of your band, the strength of your players, etc., etc. So it's a lot of ingredients going into this hookup, this meal we
Yeah.
call Panama.
um, I want to move on to a topic that, well, it's Panorama is a competition. And so I'll start by saying sometimes, as a judge, I wished it wasn't a competition.
True.
I wish it was a different structure. Now, I know competition has its place, and people, uh, many people are naturally very competitive, so they want to win. And especially if there's a big prize for the winner or the top three play groups, they're going to work harder, they'll do everything they can.
Hmm.
Um, but it also sets a certain pecking order for the next year.
Right.
We won Panorama. Um, it doesn't mean that the band that came third was bad at all,
Right.
because, I mean, particularly in the large category bands, when you get to the finals, I mean, it's a lot of great music making. But I want to talk specifically, I want to hear your views about playing for marks. So the bands get, what the judges' criteria are. Pancho Bigo has released the score sheet. You see how many marks for rhythm, how many marks for arrangement, how many marks for this. There even, as you know, there's one category, marks for dynamics. So even if the piece, as somebody said, I think it was Professor Hallman said once, well, the piece may not need changes in dynamics, it just doesn't lend itself to that. But because you're playing for marks,
You
you
got to
better
put
have
something in.
dynamic changes, otherwise you will not get those 10
Right.
points.
Right.
So have we now gone too far in terms of passing out how we evaluate a
Right.
performance? I mean, part of it is, of course, subjective. What might appeal to me as a judge might not appeal to my colleague as a
Yes.
judge. I tend to like or appreciate innovation. If I hear something and I say, I have never heard that in a panorama arrangement,
Thank you. Yes.
I would love it.
Mm.
But there are other persons, including members of the public, maybe some of our listeners, they will listen to an arrangement and will say, oh God, it ain't song like, we ain't get the runs like, the Jitsamaru runs. They're listening for tropes, they're listening for certain cadences. They want a crescendo, and then, they
Yeah.
want a formulaic procedure. And if
Uh-huh.
they don't get it, in their mind, this is not a good arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me the more we pass out the marks in a competition, the more we are stifling creativity and the innovation in Panorama. What are your thoughts about all of that?
Richard, 100%. Go to the top of the class. Listen, that that is something I have been saying for years, over and over and over. Why isn't there? I would much prefer to see a category for creativity, because that is
Oh,
what is going to keep, the music, if it has to evolve in a way where it's not, as you say, formulaic, or everybody trying to sound like everybody else, so much so when the poor judges have to sit, they hear same kind of thing from bandy bandy bancy bandy bandy. So I think creativity is very important, and this is what music is built on, creativity, right?
No, so it's, for example, let's just talk about creativity in a very specific way. So, as you know, everybody expects when they listen to the judges tour, but also the public, the listening public, you expect an introduction.
Right.
But if we look at some Beethoven symphonies, and Beethoven lived in the 18th century, he didn't do what Mozart, Haydn, and other composers did before with introductions to their symphonies, introducing thematic material. He would
Right.
just start not on the tonic chord, but he's starting on an augmentic sixth chord. He's
Right.
starting his
Right.
symphony on an augmentic sixth. No, that's innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have to have an introduction? If an arranger decides, you know what, I'm going to do something different today, we're not going to start with the theme. We're not even going to give them an introduction. I'm going to start with a rhythmic motive that they will later hear. So, reverse planning,
Yes.
something different, you know. And because
Yeah.
I think if we keep arranging to win a competition according to these marks,
Criteria.
we're
Yes.
really stifling.
Of
I've
course.
heard a ranger say to me, I can't do that, you know, I can't modulate so far because people will lose, they will lose where we are. They're not going to be able to follow it.
Right. Right. Right.
But so,
So that's the thing. Um, we have a criteria to stick to. So how dare you? I think introduction is what, six or 7 marks. So you're gonna lose 6 or 7 marks because they decided they're not gonna use an introduction. So you have to stay faithful to the criteria. That's one big hiccup right there. Um, the other thing is, even if creativity and so on is to be well explored, it has to be in keeping with the theme. So I heard one of the single pans this year. Very exciting. Woo! When I tell you exciting, dramatic arrangement. But don't ask me what was the main theme that was being explored. Poor thing, that arranger just did not show where the theme was developed. I can't recall hearing any sort of motivic development, no, snippets of the melody. It was just, oh gosh, oh yes. So, whatever you do, and that's the thing I'm saying, creativity or not, or whatever, try and be faithful to the theme, because I think from what I've been hearing over time, there are bands that present, um, I don't know if it's because it's a challenge to build around the theme and harmonize and reharmonize around the theme. So the easier way to get around that, around is to just present exciting, bam, 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 but nothing to do with the theme. So they're kind of getting away from that. I think that is something that needs to be looked into carefully, because why are you presenting a song? Why are you saying my song is Mary has had a little lamb and we're not hearing anything about Mary and her lamb in the song? You have to show where Mary has this lamb and what he did with Mary, where the lamb went and so on, and when they came back home and so on and so on. It must be connected. That is my humble view.
mhm. Well, it's certainly possible that a creative arranger or composer may err very, a little bit too far. The pendulum could swing in, you know,
Yes.
a little bit too far in that direction.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems to me, this is just my personal view, it's a bit conservative. The whole expectation for the panorama comedy, it's too conservative,
Right.
um, in my view.
Mm.
Um, what I know there are a lot of young players who are, and even musicians who are not pianists, who want to get into arranging for bands. Of course, they're not going to be selected if they've never arranged for a band to arrange for Panorama. There's too much at stake there. But when you encounter a young musician who has an interest in arranging, how would you advise them? What skills do they need to have under their belt before they attempt to arrange for a band, because I would argue that most people, when they start to arrange, if they've had no experience playing it, it's much more complicated and difficult than they think it is. So you've
Definitely.
done a lot of arranging. Can you speak to that? How would you advise aspiring young arrangers?
Yeah. So I would advise them according to the main um the main feature. I always tell them arranging requires the ability to listen. So you need to listen to various genre of music, not just past panorama arrangements and soca and so on. Have a bank of music in your system, right? So that you can now compare, contrast, analyze, draw from kind of thing, right? So it is important to listen. It's an exercise in listening and appraising. That's the first step. Once you have that, you can go on to more structured and formal stuff, chords, use of chords, the benefits of using inversions of chords and extended chords. You can go into all of those things after. But the first thing I always say, listen. Because if you're not listening to them, I mean, what are you going to where are you going to draw from? You have to draw on something. So it's very important to listen and then build on the various technicalities. And we can do that building through the elements of music, the melody, the harmony, the rhythm, and the dynamics and form and structure, things like that. And that to me makes for a more, let's say, structured approach, but not structured in a pigeonhole manner, but structured in, you sort of know what what you're about. You're not scattered and all over the place in the arrangements and so on. So, yeah.
Farid?
Yes, I wanted to raise this issue. I don't know if you could add value or if you think there's any merit in what I see. When I look at the competition, the Panorama final night, um, bands often draw for places. That is, I believe that is the format. You draw for a place, and if you perform first or last, it's all luck of the draw, or you live and die by the draw. Um, to put some context into that, Pan Am North Stars won panoramas back to back in 1963 and 64. They were going for the hat trick in 65, and Anthony Williams, he had said that his band played first in 1965, and Guinness Cavaliers, they played last. He said that his band was out of this world, and he believed it was, in his mind, a flawless performance. It was an improvement on the 63, 64 performances. He
Right.
felt very strongly about that performance to get that hat trick. But his concern at the end of the day is he said that because Guinness Cavaliers played last, the impact that they had on the judges and the impact that they got from the audience and the energy and the vibe that at the end of that performance was something he would not have liked to have to play after Guinness Cavaliers on that night. He said that the impression left on the judges after that final performance, he said he don't think the judges recovered from that performance sufficiently in order to to fairly judge the overall competition. So at the end of the day, Guinness Cavaliers won that 1965 Panorama by half a point. And he said North Stars never participated in Panorama after that.
Oh, God.
He felt that, that if it was a fair judging, what he said,
Right.
the performance, the last place performance, performing last helps. Um, my concern is this. Are you of the belief that drawing lots is the fairest mechanism to choosing a final night performance position? If it is, I may, before you answer that, if I may allude, in an Olympic, right, your times in the prelims and building to the final night. Those times that you clock contribute to the position and the lane you're in on for the final. So when
Right.
you get to that final, you would have earned the position to be in the innermost lane or the outermost
Right.
lane, whatever
Right.
lane. So it's a fair pecking order. You can't complain if you're running in lane six or
Right.
if you're running in lane one because your performances throughout the preliminaries, working your way through the heats made that determination. Are
Right.
you of the view that a band's performances at prelims, semis should contribute towards what position you perform in on final night? And that's one. And are you of the view that your when you perform, the order in which you perform, the placing has an impact in terms of your how your band come across to
Well,
judges and the audience?
I've never thought of the Olympic type approach. Let's just call it that. I've never really given that any thought to say, well, I have a particular view on it, so I'll have to mull that over my mind. It sounds reasonable, but in terms of playing first and last, no band wants to draw position number one because the view obviously is that, well, the judges won't go all the way out because they have to leave room for whoever is coming next and that sort of thing. So bands would prefer, yeah, sure, play last and wow the savannah, wow the judges, and that's it. But we have to go with the evidence. We've seen bands play in first position and win. We've seen bands play in the very last position and win. So to say it really impacts is, it might be a bit subjective, but not necessarily grounded in reality. But the reality is that no band wants to pick first. That is the reality. No band wants to pick first because of the attached connotations and so on of playing in the first position. You would be marked as to the best. Okay, your marking wouldn't match your performance. That's what everybody's fear is. You have to leave room. So even if in your mind you deserve 100 in everything, you're not going to get 100 because how could you give 111 more bands are yet to perform? You have to leave room, or you end up with a lot of ties. Four bands coming first, six bands coming second, So yeah, that's a little tricky thing. I don't really think it impacts, but what has to happen is every band has to come prepared to give a very good account of themselves. So you can play first and you are so hot that boy, you leave the savannah smoking and it's now a hard act to follow. And that's what has happened in the past with bands that have won playing in position number one. I think Renegades has done that already. Um, and then bands that have played in the last position, All Stars, Phase 2, and won the panorama. So it all has a lot to do with how well prepared you are. And I think also knowing if you get the first or the last position might help you to come even, put in a little extra something to wow the judges. Um, and yeah, I don't. But at the end of the day, who knows?
But allow me to ask this in tandem with what you just said.
Yes.
How much do you think um, a band practicing on the greens on the drag before we get on stage?
Yes.
Sometimes they say some bands, how much does it take out of your players when you practice the song three times on the greens and then you get to the stage?
Yeah.
Um, I guess you would have a phase two experience. Do you all encourage your players to go all out? Is there a formula on the greens so by the time you peak on stage?
That greens is so important. The worst feeling for a panelist on a performance night is to not warm up on the greens before hitting that stage. You want to be warmed, ready, pumped in order to give that final energetic performance on the stage. So one is we warm up is very helpful. Two, it helps to further concretize the musical information that you have to display. And better so if you have a song that is really attracting the audience on the green, on the drag as we call it. Um, they're moving with you, and every time you finish it, yeah, and you're going up there with confidence and so on. So it helps. It's more of a mixture of a psychological boost as well as the final preparation to hit that stage. It's very important. Bands would be mad. I mean, if the sometimes when you have the track stewards who are there to ensure that there's a smooth flow of the bands on stage. So sometimes you get a little upset when they tell you and you can't go any further to practice here. Oh, this is my dog. Sit on it. Yes. So you can't go any further, or you need to stop now because you don't want to hear that. You want to make sure you get the best, the most of it. You don't want to have to wait in that holding bay for too long and get back cold. And, you know. So, yeah, that drag is a real important aspect of it.
How does it
Awesome.
work? How does it work on the track? So that before the band goes on stage, how does the band captain communicate with all the players? Because I would imagine not everybody's just standing right next to the pan rack.
Right.
So some people went to buy something to eat, some people went to the bathroom, some people meet in family, some people going in the north stand to line with some friends until the band. How do you communicate?
Right. So all of those things are communicated prior to getting to the savannah. So the last night rehearsal, you talk about all of these things. When we get there, we want to remain as a unit rehearsing. That is not the time to go and hear what the other band is playing or to go, as you said, go online in the bleachers and so forth and so on. We have to stick together. Yes, there will be the odd player or two who will leave and people get thirsty, but most times people bring something to drink or whatever to the players, right? Um, in the context of a band that's really large and the crowd is thick, that's not the time and there's noise. You can't really talk to the band as such. So it's important to have all these things laid out before. You have section leaders who are assigned to ensure that they're seeing all of their players in their sections or to be able to at least give an account if the arranger says, so where's so and so? They say, no, he just went to use the washroom or something like that. So that also helps with ensuring that you have most, if not all, of the players behind their instruments, manning their instruments. What also helps is a sort of structured approach. So you get there in time, early. So you have enough time to run the song over and over, rehearse the intro 10,000 times, rehearse the ending 10,000 times, 10,000 times, the entire thing, right? Um, and then you take a break. But when you take the break, again, once there's some silence, everybody knows you do what you have to do. But when you hear that knock, 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 knock on the pan, it means we're trying to regroup. So that you will have to do that knocking several times because you're in the savannah, of course. And then you will
Mhm.
start up, and in the distance, some player who's like, yeah, here in the band, blah, 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 blah. So you don't ever start back with everybody. So you start nice and slowly, and gradually you'll see all the pans, all the racks filling up, and when you end the song and so on, then you take it again up to a better, stronger tempo. You're monitoring. Okay, we have to turn now, so you're playing and turning, that sort of thing. And when you get on that final straight to go up, that's when everybody knows that yes, we have to be there, and you take it up to tempo, and you go in charging now, brimming with confidence.
Can I ask you about performance tempo?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it customary that whoever's leading the band, whoever's going to give
Because it's
that
getting dark. Oh my gosh, it's before night. 1 second, Rich.
sure, sure.
Right, you should be able to see me a little better now. 1 second. Yes, sorry about that.
No problem.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good position. Light on your face. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I was just thinking about performance tempo. Of course, I know in rehearsal you always play passages under tempo. But
Hmm.
what about, I'm asking specifically about consistency in starting it at the right tempo, because I would imagine if the tempo is a little bit too fast or a little bit too slow, it can affect your arrangement or parts of the arrangement or the
Right.
accuracy of the ensemble. Is it customary that they would use a metronome app to be right on that rhythm?
Yep. That's what is done now. That's what is
Okay,
done now. So during the rehearsal sessions, that's when you go through, you know, all of the little growth and the growth procedures. So we're growing to blossom towards that final performance on stage. So you'll go through setting a tempo at 110, 112, 114, 108, whatever. But at the end of the day, it is set at the tempo that derives the best performance and execution. Because some
right,
passages might be easy, oh, 120 and they could play it.
right,
Yeah, but get into some other intricate passages, you lost, you hear chewing gum, everybody's skating. So you get the
right,
right tempo and you use the app, yeah,
right.
with it.
And how long before the competition would that tempo be decided? In other words, is there a period of time where you would want the players to play it at this tempo? Because part of, at least for me, there is a tempo memory. When we play something enough at a tempo, we remember it. Even if there's a transition
Yep,
and there's no time to give a preparatory beat to show the change of tempo, we just
right.
remember it.
That's right. You feel it.
So we feel it. Yeah,
Correct.
I call it tempo memory. But is there a similar thing in the pan world?
Yeah, well, you'd want to get that going by, I would say, for the latest. And of course, every band's context is different. So if we're talking about bands where you're going to have all of your players at your disposal, you're looking at having that tempo set maybe 2 nights before the competition night, whether it's the preliminaries, the semis, or final, whatever is the competition night, at least maybe 2 nights before. It depends on when the piece is finished as well. Um, you will go through. So if like there's a band the other day in this small band competition, they finished their intro, and that's another thing. Most bands tend to do the intro last. They did their introduction 11 o'clock the night before, right? So they would not have been able to set the right tempo until that was done. Because you have to get a tempo which speaks to every section of the arrangement. So the intro can be executed well, all of the developments and so on right down.
Mhm.
So, but if I'm to give you an average time, I would say 2 days. 2 days. But of
Mhm.
course, I'm saying each band's circumstance is different. It may not be until the day before. Some bands might be 3, 4 days before. You know, it
Mhm.
depends.
Right. So let's zoom out now and let's look at this whole pan industry from the 10,000-foot level. Having been involved in the pan fraternity for so long, if you had to list two things that you would like to see happen if money was not an object, let's just dream. What would you like to see it in for the pan industry to to go further? What do you think the most important um, developments would be?
I would say, in terms of, let's say, the art form itself, chroming of the instruments is very important. And I'm not sure that one chrome factory is sufficient to satisfy the demand we have. And I don't know if you're aware that the chrome factory that was in highest demand there was a fire there and so on, and it took years. I mean, we had to be bands. When I say we, bands had to be whew, sending pans to Chrome. Well, the tuners, I should say, in the US or Mexico and so on, and bringing them back here, which was ridiculous. We need to be the mecca in the true sense. So we should be the center where, okay, you want pans made, tuning from when it's the raw material right up to the final instrument. You need to come here. You want pans chrome, you coming here, etc. So I would like to see that. We should not have to be going abroad to, to chrome instruments and that sort of thing. Trinidad and Tobago, the go-to place. And that goes for all aspects of the art form. So in terms of educational practices specific to the steel band art form, um, you want to learn how to arrange for a panorama competition or what have you. There must be some sort of website that you can go to with institutions or individuals certified by the governing body, so that when you come to Trinidad and you visit this site and you see that it's certified by so and so, boom, you're getting quality when you come to Trinidad and Tobago. So, in other words, what I'm saying, we must be, without question, the best place to provide all of the needs, all of the education, everything concerning the steel band art form, Trinidad and Tobago. Far too often, it's kind of happening in reverse order, and I am not too pleased about that.
Mhm. And why is it? Why are we not yet the mecca in those aspects? Is it well? Let me make a guess. I'll make a guess as to why it's not this way.
Okay,
Because it takes a tremendous amount of investment of resources to set it up. And
right,
if we're going to have people um, set up a real training program, let's say for arrangers, they need to be well compensated. They have to earn their living from it. It can't be something they're doing at night on the side on the weekend if we're
that's
serious about it.
that's right.
And because they can't earn a living from it, and they have to do it on the side or as a favor to a young person wanting to learn to read, they're going abroad to look for work and they're traveling out all the time.
Yes.
How much truth is there in that, Michelle?
Yeah, I would say there's a good bit of truth in that because that's the reality. The financial resources are not necessarily thrown behind these aspects of the art form. And this is why during the carnival season, you see a lot of um, players, arrangers, perhaps even tuners, where they can find the time, seeking as much work as possible, because that's the time when the gaze is now on the art form.
Yeah.
And corporate TNT, I mean, everybody can cash in on it. So the panelists, why not me? We are the ones providing the music. The tuners, why not me? We are providing the instruments. The arrangers, we are providing music. You see? So definitely the financial resources are not necessarily directed towards the art form in a general and futuristic manner. And this is why we have these shortfalls and we are not quite yet the mecca. We talk about it, but it's not yet happening.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But do you think that in the pan leadership fraternity, the leadership of the pan fraternity, do you think that there is a vision? Do you think they have a vision for the next 10, 15 years of where they want this industry to be?
Yes, I am pretty sure they do have a vision. Um, and what I'm mentioning now is, that sort of fits into some of the things that they are looking into, where we get those the certification or accreditation, the stamps of approval, that sort of thing that comes from Trinidad. You have that GI, the geographical indication that shows, like I don't know if you've heard it mentioned by the minister, um and by the Pan Trinbago president too. They've worked and managed to get the GIs for the steel band industry. So, like the Swiss watches are known to be what? You have a switch. When you have a Swiss watch, you know this is a switch of sorry, a watch of excellent standard and quality and so on. So that is the same thing that must be assigned to instruments that have been tuned by tuner X or provided by company Y, because they would have now gone through the process of okay, their instruments are examined and so on for quality assurance, boom, stamp on that. So anybody buying an instrument from them, but be it here or abroad, can rest assured that they have an instrument of quality. So those are the things I know they're working on. So yeah, I'm confident we will get there, but we ain't got there yet.
Farid?
To produce a band year in year out, it's a work of love.
It is.
There is no way a band could be self-sufficient in the context of um, instruments cost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And unless you win a panorama, you're not in that bracket where you can win the earn the most money. $1 million can't justify the season. It simply doesn't work like that. When we look at Pancho Diego's um, involvement, they get 10% of the winning. So it's not even a million when you win.
Right.
And if I understand clearly, they get 10% of even the prize money of the last place band. So
Yeah, all bands, all bands.
right. So it's almost a steel band has to have a very dedicated sponsor to be able to stay afloat, and a committed sponsor where there's constant streams of money.
Yes.
It means that there are bands that lose before they even begin. They lose at the blocks.
You started losing.
Yeah.
You started with a loss. And that's the
And
bitter reality. That's the bitter
are
reality.
you of the view that the state has to change the industry, and the state has to invest more and change the nature of how steel bands contract within the space for there to be development? Because we can't depend on a sponsor investing and changing the playing field. The playing field has to be changed from
Right,
a panoramic point of view in terms of the landscape, and the tone must be set by the state.
right.
Do you think that the more involvement by the state is going to change the landscape, or you can't see it being done any other way?
Well, um, state involvement is inevitable. We definitely need to have state involvement. But um the problem with that is convincing the state that this is not just hold a second, eh? What can you give me 1 second here? Sorry about that.
Sure.
Well, Richard, it's been an
That was
interesting
a.
dialogue. We are within 3 minutes of closure, but we have gotten
Mhm.
to that point where we could engage her for 2 more minutes. Um, it's been a good dialogue.
I'm sorry
Yes,
about that.
this is a
Sorry,
Yeah,
that
you're
was
very
back with us now.
this is a very good question. Yeah.
yes.
Um,
I
yeah,
was saying.
we want you to respond to this idea of state involvement in.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead. You were about to say.
Right. So
I
so
like this
it's
question a lot.
state involvement is quintessential, and it is about getting state to buy into the fact that steel band is not just confined to being an art form and we invented the pan and so on, but it is an industry that can earn the country tremendous revenue. It's $1 billion industry. Figures have been crunched to prove that, right? And I think because of that, this is why the Ministry of Trade and Industry set up this steering committee to explore every possible aspect of the industry to see
Oh,
where
so
the shortfalls are. Yeah.
So this is the steering committee that you were speaking about earlier.
Correct.
Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. So I will be calling you for updates, huh? So it's very exciting because it's I'm glad Fareed asked this question. A couple years back. Let's make an analogy. A couple years back, when
Right.
Morocco made the World Cup, everybody in the world was astonished that a small country like Morocco could get their football team
Correct.
to the World Cup.
Yes.
But it didn't just happen all of a sudden. The
Nope.
Moroccan
Nope.
government
Nope.
invested in
Ah.
training programs 12 years before and
Mm-hmm.
built the facilities, hired, scouted for the best trainers in
Yes.
football, brought them to Morocco, and
Mm-hmm.
then they created an environment, a live-in educational environment where young boys and girls from all over Morocco were living, breathing soccer as well as academics, and the
Correct.
government funded the entire thing. So I think that our leaders have to understand it takes tremendous amount of resources in prolonged investment over
Yep.
time, but dedicated investment and focused with a
Yes.
purpose. Here's
Of
the
course.
goal. Here's what
That,
we want to accomplish in 10 years.
that's
Not
right.
here's what we want to do next year for Carnival.
Correct.
We have to think further along,
Oh,
further
yes.
along. And as the government changes, we have to stay on that track,
Stay on that trajectory. We
stay
have.
on that track, and huge
Mm-hmm.
amount of resources. Because as Fareed was talking about $1 million, that's prize money once a year. What about the continuous development of the players and
Oh, yeah, yeah.
refinement of the instruments
That's
and
right.
training the next generation of
Mm-hmm.
administrators? Because
Right.
that's important, right? I don't
Mhm.
think we can just depend on the private sector to say,
Yeah.
because some bands are going to lose out, as Fareed said. Some bands are going to get big companies sponsoring, and some bands will never. They don't have a big enough profile to attract
Yeah.
a sponsor,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they have the potential. They have the
Correct.
potential. The
Correct.
next time we meet, I know we're out of time, but we must have you back. And the next time I'm going to tell you the question now. The next time is, why do we not have one Trinidad and Tobago national band that represents the nation? Save the answer for the next interview. You can think about it. Fareed,
Thank you, Dr. Tangyok. Thank you, Michelle Huggins Watts. We look forward to another occasion for another public education program that continues next week. Thank you so much. Enjoy evening and best wishes for the season, Michelle. Thank you.